we all had guardians, and flew out of Marion, and it was just really an honor. And there was one World War II guy on the plane from Benton, Bob Poole, 97 years old. Pretty stinking spry, too. I mean, now there was 4 Korean veteran men on the plane. They're getting old, too. Then there was the rest of us were Vietnam veterans. And I was one of the youngest ones. And I'm 78, so, you know, it wasn't a bunch of spring chickens. Let's put it this way. They took a wheelchair for all of us. They said, if you don't need it, your guardian's going to push it anyway. Because when you get to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, if you're in a wheelchair, you get to sit up front. So when we got there, we all sat down in those wheelchairs, so we'd get a good seat. But and basically, they just took us to the memorials. We went to the World War II Memorial. We went to the Korean War Memorial, which is really neat. The Vietnam Memorial, which we have at least one person from Benton who got killed during Vietnam. Then we went to the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine, all their memorials. And it was just really a neat experience. I'd like to share with you, I think it's 5 highlights of what I got out of this trip. And I'm going to tell you the first one was I got to spend 18 hours with one of my children by himself, just the 2 of us. And you adults that got kids, those days are few and far between, if ever. I mean, yeah, we get together as family, but this was one-on-one. I got to ask him questions. I got to ask him questions about the Lord. One best highlight I had right there was doing that. Also, when we landed at Reagan, we got off the plane, and we happened to come in a regular gate that had people were sitting around to leave on. And we all had either our shirt on, or we had a jacket that said veteran on it. And as we came down the corridor and out into the waiting area, the people all started applauding. I don't know how you feel, but it just makes you, if you ever had something like that happen, you just kind of well up inside, you know? Proud, yes. Feel good, yes. It was neat. Probably the third thing we did is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. I've been to Washington, D.C. 2 or 3 times before, but that never gets old. It's just wow. And Will and Michelle Rojak's son has worked with that unit. In fact, I think he headed it up for a while. So we've got people in the church that are really attached to that. But wonderful. And then another thing that I thought was really neat was on the way back, they had what they call mail call. And those of you who've served in the military, you know what mail call is all about. When your mail from your family, your loved one shows up. I happened to be in Vietnam. I was stationed out in a field, but there were just 5 of us. We were down in the Delta, and it was okay. But so we didn't never know when we were going to get mail. But we all got mail, and I opened the letters on the plane that I got. I don't know how many I got. I got a bunch. And that, and for my 70th birthday, my family, girls mainly, but all of them, put together a party for me out here. And they wrote to 70 people and asked them to send me a note. And I got some marvelous letters then. And I got some this time too. And just, I never forget. Probably the highlight of the letters I got both times were from a kid who worked for me 25 years ago, long time ago, and he's fairly reserved. He won't do anything to. Don't ever ask him to come up here. There ain't no way. But he writes the most dynamic, the best notes to me. I mean, they were, great. And he wrote me one for the honor flight too. He wrote me one for my birthday. And I've told his family, I don't know if I've told him directly or not, but man, he outstanding. And then the last thing probably that spoke to me the most was when we landed back in Marion, an hour and a half late. We were supposed to get back at 8:15, and we got back at after 10. They take you off the plane, introduce you, and there's people everywhere letting you know they appreciate you. And there was over 15 people there that were friends of mine out of this church that stayed up that late, that came down there just for me. You know, that's really good. There's enough people that care that they come down there and do that. That was the kind of the highlights of what I got out of it. But I want to share something else with you too. Honor Flight is completely donations and monies they raise. It's all ran by volunteers. They don't pay one top guy and everybody else is a volunteer. They are all volunteers. And each flight costs $120,000. That's what it costs us, and they do 2 a year. That's almost $250,000 they raise every year to be able to go. And that's where our church comes in. I don't know how much you know about the finances of our church, but I'm going to share with you a little bit. We give to the Honor Flight. Our church does. In fact, you gave enough this year that you paid for me to go. I think that's neat. So my own church family paid for me to go. Outstanding. Now, I'd like to explain to you how we do that. Just for some of you newer people or some of you people that don't come to business meetings, our church budget is $775,000 a year. I don't care where you come from. That's a lot of money. There's probably, Mike Andrews may make that kind of money in a year, but there's none of the rest of us do. You know what the church does? They do the same thing that you and I should be doing. They tithe on it. So our church gives $75,000 a year to missions. And when you think about that, $775,000, that is $15,000 a week. That means 150 people in this church have to give $100 a week just for our mission here. And that's a lot of money. And I think we need to realize some of the things we do with our money, the places we donate it, and the amount we give. And if you don't give, please do. I think we're a wonderfully run church. And in closing, I would just like to say, if you know anybody that might be qualified to go, ask them, tell them, check it out. And I know if you find somebody to go, Mark Miner would love to be a guardian and go with him. And if he can't, Casey McCommons, he'd go in a heartbeat. He's been once, and he'd like to go again. So check it out. Thank you very much for letting me go. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for your service. And thank you, church. I want to get personal here. We're going to close. I'm going to give a little out of a little Bible study, if you will, or a couple of thoughts out of Exodus chapter 4 here in just a moment, but to close out. But one of the things I so appreciate about this church, in fact, I had somebody not of our church tell me yesterday about the heart of our church. Didn't have to. This individual didn't have to. And I'm not just bragging on the church because we're here. It's Sunday morning and I get to be a part. I'm pastor and all of that. I mean, genuinely meant it. But the heart to give and the heart to honor are two of the things that I see among this church, this congregation, these people. You've taken people in from everywhere. We welcome them. I'm looking over there. I think, is Pasca, she's back there now? Okay. Our sister Pasca Chariot, who lived with us for a number of years from Kenya, is here with us today. And some of you will remember some years ago when Wren Lake had a track program that was bringing in a lot of people, a lot of international students, and most of them would show up here on Sunday morning. Part of that was because of the excellent service. Part of it was because Pam Miner was feeding them after church. But regardless, we've welcomed them. We welcome people. You welcome people. And just as I watched Bob walk off, and I know, Bob, you've had standing ovations before, probably. Well, I mean, seriously, somewhere along the line you probably have. You deserve it. I mean, seriously. But that's one of the things that I feel like you all are so quick to do. You're quick to honor people. You're quick to recognize whether you happen to throw a 12-pound iron ball 59 feet and a quarter inch, or as Caden Jones jumped the pole vault, or as Cole Buchanan from our church ran on the relay in the state, and there's other people here, athletes who have done amazing things, but we want to honor people. It isn't about us. It really isn't even about the church. One of the things we're going to be doing, just to let you in a little secret, we've got the T-shirts going around now and trying to, about that 100-year anniversary. And one of the things that the heart of the church has been is not to make it about what this church is or who you are or any of those type of things. So on June 30th, for those of you listening, as well as those of you here, on June 30th in the evening, we have a professional fireworks show. It will be at the ball field, which is behind Harbor Lights, the property that the church owns and hopes to someday build a new church and sanctuary on. But and it's the same people that are doing Mount Vernon and Harrisburg shows and all the different ones around. It's going to be a great opportunity to celebrate. But what the heart of the church has been, and this came from you, not from me, was we need to give back to the community. And so we're going to have a fireworks show, and we're going to invite everybody. We're expecting 1,000 people, maybe more, to come and watch. And the whole reason is because it's about the community. It's about the people. And that's what the Lord does. He helps you realize that it's not about us. It's not about you. It's about the God who wants to work through you and in you. And that's where you're going to find your fulfillment. I'm certain my brother Bob Martin would say that. This most fulfilling thing that he does is what he does for the Lord, and he does a tremendous amount. So this morning, if you want to turn in your Bibles, you don't have to, because I'm just going to recite one verse. Exodus chapter 4. You know the story. This is just one of my walking sticks. Every time, I love to go to the Shawnee Hills, love to go down and hiking, just hanging out by myself, usually those with a bunch of kids, my own children, or some others. We've had some exciting times in the Shawnee Hills. For example, I remember the time Nathan and Brian and myself went. It was raining about like it is now. I drove the car farther into the field than I should have. We started raining very hard, and we had a couple of sleeping bags and a backpack. Of course, the sleeping bag got wet, and as we were heading, we found a little bit of a cave place to maybe sleep for the night. It wasn't very much, and it was on a pretty steep bank, and we had a backpack. We had a sleeping bag. It happened to be, some of you will remember this, it was a Daisy Duke sleeping bag. I mean, we just, had Dukes of Hazzard, and that's what it was. Well, we set it down, and the first thing that happens, of course, it rolls down the bank and into the river, into the creek. So it was a wet, rainy, nasty, glorious night to be together. And so that's kind of my hiking experiences most of the time. That's why nobody wants to go with me. But I always try to cut a staff, and this is a cedar tree, and you can take it and just sit around a fire. You can whittle off it. I like cedar because it lasts forever. Usually it's pretty straight, pretty easy. After the sap dries off and you've got the bark off, it makes for a good stick, and this stick's probably 40 years old, this walking stick that I have there at the house. But I want you to simply think not so much of this as a walking stick for me or anything like that, but as a staff. In Exodus chapter 3 and then into chapter 4, there's a conversation, you're all familiar with it. God shows up and wrecks Moses' world. He thinks everything's good. He's about 80 years old. He's been hanging out with the sheep for the last 40 years, and that's probably going to be his lot in life to the end. And then God shows up. Some of you have had that experience here today. You thought everything was going like this, and then God showed up. And the fire came and the burning bush, and Moses turned aside. You know all of that. And then there was that conversation where God is beginning to call Moses to do some things. And Moses, like most of us here, makes all the excuses as to why he can't. Finally, chapter 4, verse 2, God asked Moses a question. He says, "What is that in your hand?" And of course, Moses responded, "Well, it's my staff." And Moses had probably had his staff for 40 years. And then God asked Moses to do something. He asked him to throw it down. You remember the story, any of you? So he threw it down. You remember what happened next? The children's church probably do. It turned into a snake. And then God told Moses, pick it up by the tail, but nonetheless, pick it up. And I want to say to you this morning, as we think about our country, as we think about our lives, as we think about some of the difficulties, quote unquote, that we have. Look, folks, the difficulties you have this morning are nothing compared to what most of the world woke up with this morning. If you're living in America, you won life's lottery. You have freedoms that most people in the world just can't even imagine of. And we take them for granted sometimes. But Moses did what God asked him to. He threw his staff down. And then God said, pick it up now. And when he picked it up by the tail, but when he picked it up, that staff now became the staff of God. And God used that staff mightily. It only took place, though, when there was complete and total surrender. But after Moses had surrendered his staff, it became the staff of God. What happened to this staff? Well, a lot of things. If you read on through the scripture, the staff devoured the other serpents that were all around it. And the Egyptians did the same, but if you'll remember, Moses' staff and Aaron's staff as well devoured the staffs, the serpents, if you will. We sang that song, Crushing Snakes. I always like that line. Walking on hands of angels, crushing snakes. By the way, that's straight from the book of Luke. That's exactly what God said we would do if we began to walk in his authority. So Moses surrendered his authority and he took up God's. With Moses' staff, not much could have happened. Not much would have happened. He would have lived and died a shepherd on the backside of Egypt, unknown to any of us. But when he surrendered his authority, his staff, to God, everything changed. The staff devoured the false philosophies and ideas of the priests of Egypt. The staff was extended out, Moses' staff that now was the staff of God. The staff was extended out over the Nile River, and it turned to blood. It was extended 9 other times to usher in the plagues that would eventually bring forth the freedom of the children of God.